going back to, well, at least the incorporation of the city.
There you
Might be
go.
of interest. I'll look at it. And to my great-great-grandfather's first, second farm, signed by President Polk. But my mother gave that to the people that currently own the farm.
No, me too. And I had to go take off one of the ones I had on. I was too. And my hair is the same. People, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think that this one goes back to the King of England, but. Mr. Roth is coming back, I know, and Miss Allen is coming back.
Word half.
Oh, Miss Allen's over there.
No, not at all. And I don't know what she's.
One,
gonna do
two,
for sometime.
3, 4, 5, that will be 6. Yeah.
Mhm.
We're at about 7, I think.
Okay.
Well, poor Mr. Ford carries those minutes around for us to approve our closed session minutes,
You know,
which mostly are
All right, I'm ready.
nothing,
sometimes it's harder.
but he carries them around and.
Hi, everybody. We're going to get started, please.
Yeah, I
If
have
everyone
to
could
go
take
up,
their seat. Clerk, could you start the roll, please?
Alan,
All right.
Say here.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting the meeting.
Roth coming back and I think Lewis.
Okay.
Looks like.
okay, Alan,
Alan present.
you, Arroyo, Bates,
Here.
Garcia, Bright, Gums, Iqbal,
Iqbal remote.
Juby,
remote.
Caius,
Is present.
Leonard, Lewis,
Who's here?
Linder,
Litter over here.
Molina,
Molina present remotely.
Penesis remote.
Roth, Sanchez. Thank you. Strathman,
Strathman here.
Sturgis,
Sturgis remote.
Carver, Pepe, Williams, Young, Pirog.
I'm here.
How's your name again?
All right, and
Roth here.
hello, Bill. The people who are in the room, may I allow Mr. Sturgis, Mr. Iqbal, Ms. Juby, Ms. Molina, and Mr. Penesis to attend remotely?
No objections.
Thank you. And there will not be any voting today. So it's just good. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, we're all just going to be listening today and we'll be taking no votes.
20 minutes.
All right, so. Pledge, Mr. Ross, your last one in. Please.
All right, let me take my coat off. Pledge allegiance.
United States of America. To the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Thanks.
Is there any public comment? Okay, I'm not aware of any. I don't see, we have none online. All right, I'd like to bring up Director Labrillo, and she's going to lead our conversation on conducting effective employee evaluations and setting goals.
Hello, I would really like to thank everyone for being here. This material is general in nature. It's just some general HR background. This is not specific to any particular employee, department. This is just general information that I think is really good for everyone here as you guys will look to evaluating department heads potentially in the future with the new policy, as well as to any county staff who evaluate employees. So this information is not specific. So I do want you, if you have questions about anything specific, I want this to be interactive, and I want to encourage people throughout the presentation, if you have a question, to please stop me and ask your question so that we can have a good discussion.
Madam Chair, quickly, if this is gonna be a long presentation, maybe we should sit down. Are you the only presenter? Maybe, I don't know.
I'm comfortable.
Standing?
It's okay.
It's
Yeah,
gonna be a
I'm
long,
comfortable.
because I don't like sitting this long either, so like.
It's good for me. I sit all day, so the standing's probably
Sorry for the
good for me. But
interruption.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, Surges,
Yes, Mr. Sturgis.
Jamie, is this specific to, or are we conducting this in reaction to the most recent update allowing the guiding the department heads to the committees? Is this part and parcel, I guess is what I'm saying?
It was, that did precipitate this. There were some questions about what is the process for a good evaluation and for goal setting. So there were some questions about that, and that is what precipitated the chairman setting this to give this information to the board. But the information itself, I think, can be useful to anyone who's managing an employee.
Okay, second part of that is there were there were a few board members with very specific questions. I think Mr. Sanchez may have been one of them. Did you have the opportunity to speak with them to address their concerns, and are those concerns incorporated within your presentation today?
I did not hear from any board members about any specific concerns they may have regarding this material. Certainly available to answer questions during this presentation to the extent that I'm able. And certainly if anyone has any questions that they want to send to me via email or call me on the phone, I think everybody knows how to get in touch with me, and my contact information is on the last page.
Thank you so much.
We know where you live.
And they all know where I live, where I reside, right here in Building A.
And my office is just down the block from hers.
Okay, so if there's no additional questions before we start, I'll go ahead and get started. Employee evaluations, they're not just paperwork. We really want to help our employees develop and grow, and the evaluations are part of the process to keep them growing and make sure they're growing in the right direction, the direction that we want them to, and the direction that is most beneficial to their position. When you combine employee evaluations with SMART goals, they really drive efficiency. And that is our goal here. We want to streamline the efforts to efficiency. So if we keep people growing and their goals set in the direction that we need that growth, we really make sure we're focusing our efforts on the correct spot. So this is just the objectives of what I hope to accomplish today. We really want to make sure that everyone here understands what we're trying to accomplish with these evaluations, so that you can ask questions if you need more information, and that you feel like you know what you're doing in going into the process of conducting evaluations. Why do we conduct the evaluations? What are we hoping to accomplish when we conduct an evaluation? We really want to clarify what we want from the employee. We really want to make sure they understand what the expectations of their position are, where they should be focusing their efforts. And, truly they may not know. It's very possible that in the course of managing your employee, you haven't really made clear to them where your expectations lie. Some employees, they expect a lot of themselves. It may be way beyond what you expect of them. Some employees expect less of themselves than you expect, and you can't expect them to be achieving at the level you want if you haven't communicated to them what level you want them to achieve. It's also a really good opportunity to highlight an employee's strengths and build them up. If they know what their strengths are, they can capitalize on those strengths. And then there's also the part about setting goals and talking to the employee about their personal goals. So they may have personal development goals. This may include continued education, expanding into a similar area that's of need to you and your department, or just helping understand what their career growth is about. They may be looking to move up. They may be looking for management experience, or they may tell you, this is something I'm not good at. And you may help find the resources so that they can get the education or training that they need to be better at a part of their job. It is a really good conversation to have with an employee when you're conducting their evaluation. And another reason to conduct them is to make sure that we're retaining documentation for the future. So there's a history of this employee that may exist well beyond your time here. So your time managing them will come and go. Everybody does. And that documentation helps keep track of, what did you tell them to do? How did you tell them to grow? What did you tell them to do in terms of improvement or not improving? And that history is important both for the employee and for any subsequent managers that may come in to help manage that employee. What we are not doing with evaluations is just important as what we are doing. You should never be telling an employee for the first time about a problem at the same time that you're marking them down. You really want to address things that are an issue with you timely with your employees. You don't want to save a list of grievances and then sit down at the evaluation and pour them out. If you have an issue with an employee, it is really important to talk to them about it right away. Give them a chance to understand your expectation and correct. And only if they don't correct it, are you going to mark them down in an evaluation on that. It's just really important not to have a surprise when they sit down in that evaluation meeting. If they are failing at something to the point of you needing to mark them down, they should already know that it's a problem. Evaluations are also have nothing to do with whether you like a person. They're about their job performance. They also should not be pitting one employee against another. This employee is great, therefore I'm going to mark you down. And you also want to make sure you're not biasing your 1 year evaluation on things that have occurred in the last month. It's just really easy to do as a manager to think about your recent history. You really want to think about the entire year if you're evaluating on a year. Nor do you want to be really hung up on one bad event or one great event that happened, but you want to look at the whole of that employee's year if you are evaluating on a year. For evaluation criteria, I've attached the form that we use in human resources that we have shared with the department heads. This is something that while we have not required a certain form for evaluations, I'm just going to kind of go through the type of information that we have on the form that we have in place. It is a department head's decision whether they want to use this form or use one of their own, as long as the form is objective. So don't worry, I'm going to blow this up, so you're not going to have to read that. The form will be sent out to everyone. It's editable. So if when you're walking into an evaluation, you want to add a criteria, take some away, or make changes, you certainly can. If you are looking at criteria to add, the job description is a good place to go. Those are the things that you should be evaluating that employee on.
Can you blow that up for us so we can just take a quick look at it? Thank you. And a little bit bigger.
Well, Blair will have to zoom that in a little more for us.
There you go.
So this is broken into a couple of categories.
Question over here. Microphone, please.
So do we have job descriptions on file for all these positions?
Yeah, if you're talking about department heads, yes, we have job descriptions that are in place for all the department heads.
Okay, and where do we find those?
I can send them to you. I mean, they're in our records. They're, so if you're looking for a department head job description, let me know, or I could send the entire list out. I know they've been sent out in the past under certain circumstances, but I can't remember when the last time was. It'd just be easier for me to send them again.
Okay, yeah, because I think that would be important as we go into this process that we make sure we all have that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. To follow up on that, when you send those job descriptions, are you going to, so that I get a better understanding, and perhaps the board members as well, each defined committee is going to be evaluating that department head. Will the entire board, because sometimes board members are not members of the committee, be part of that evaluation? Or will it be limited to those members of that defined committee? How is this going to work? Do we know?
So that is the board's decision. So in terms of when we were originally putting this forward in the evaluations and the policy we have, all board members can contribute. So anyone who wants to come to that meeting, all board members are welcome at any meeting. And so anyone can contribute feedback and comments. We'll also talk a little bit later too. You certainly, as a committee, can make a decision to solicit feedback from other people if you feel it's appropriate. I would make sure that your department head is aware of the kind of people you're soliciting feedback from to make sure there's no conflicts. For example, you wouldn't want to solicit feedback from a vendor because you would not want to create any kind of conflict of interest. But an example of where you might want to get feedback would be the workforce development, the WIOA board, in terms of the director of workforce development. That's another entity that works directly with that department head who may be able to provide you good information about how that department head is working with the community. Or the public health board in terms of health. So there might be some other places that you do want to solicit information. You certainly can decide to solicit information from whomever you want. Just make sure you're not creating some kind of conflict of interest.
And should the committee, the chair of that committee or the committee itself or members of the committee solicit feedback from an employee that the department head is supervising?
I don't recommend that. That's certainly something they can choose to do. Those are often called 360 evaluations, in which a person is evaluated both by their supervisors and by the people they manage. There are some situations in which 360 evaluations can be incredibly useful, but I don't recommend it as a part of an annual evaluation. 360 evaluations are great for really healthy teams on how they can improve upon their existing processes. In a situation where you have a disgruntled employee who may not be performing well, you may end up with some information that's unnecessarily slanted because of some other events that have happened. And that's why I don't recommend you use them as any part of a regular evaluation. It's a tool that's out there if you feel like you need it in a certain circumstance, but I would definitely caution you as to the results of a 360.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Surges.
Jamie, when we hire a department head, is it a job offer that outlines their performance and expectations very strictly to follow? Or is it more of a contractual type basis? Hey, you're being hired specific to this. I know when I'm hiring one of our department heads, that job offer really spells out soup to nuts. I'm not sure how we handle that at the county. We don't get at the board level. We don't get involved with that. So I'm just trying to figure out from the basis of doing this, how is in this particular case, the department head viewing this from the perspective of, but this is what I was hired to do, and I've completed that. So, okay, great. But now you've been with us for 10 years. Has anybody re-upped or reevaluated or renewed the contract or changed the job offer? Or how do we, I may not be articulating that properly, but if you catch my drift, how are we doing that from time to time?
I think I do understand your question. And when they're hired with a job description. This is the charge of the department and you're managing all functions of the department. Job descriptions are written that give the highlights, but job descriptions are not super specific because they do need room for a change of priorities and things like that. Job descriptions are intentionally written overarching, right? To make sure that we include all of the things that may come into play in order to effectively manage that department. part of the reason to do this process is because things change. Did you merge departments? Did you remove a function? Did the law change that increased some part of the job? To evaluate specifically all of the things that are happening in that position, and if those overarching responsibilities are being effectively achieved. So I think this process can help make sure that there is a review of if that job has grown, has it changed? What has changed? Have our expectations changed? That's why these attributes that are being considered in the evaluation: job knowledge, skill and proficiency in carrying out the assigned responsibilities. The assigned responsibilities are on the job description. So you want to make sure, are they skilled at carrying out those? So there's each of these attributes gets at a different part of their ability to complete the job responsibilities on their job description. If you are going to change a job description, that is a separate process. But
And that's exactly where I'm going. So what do you do when you downsize a department, or somebody leaves, hey, it's retirement, we're not going to replace them, but we'd like you to absorb some other responsibilities? Do we, at that specific moment in time, change their contract, their job offer, how do we evaluate something that changed midstream? Or are we evaluating the tasks, whether they've completed or not, or how they went after the tasks?
In terms of the first question, what if somebody's job description changes? I'm not aware of anything outlined in code that identifies how you would go about changing a job description, other than when we have done things like that, it's been through resolution, right? So it's been an agreement of the board to make a change, a specific change. And those are some of the larger changes. For example, the merging of the IT and building management department that was done via resolution. So I'm not aware of anything in which any committee has the ability to change somebody's job description. So I would say I would caution you against changing a job description without looking into what the actual formal process would be for something like that.
And a more recent one, Mr. Surges, is what happened with workforce development, how that shifted to workforce development now, and the grants that they were managing have now been distributed to the health department.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually.
And I would assume that to follow along, that the management, the job description for both development, which I believe has already been amended, but not for the director, and the health department, and I'm not quite sure if public health has changed their goals for management of homeless grants and whatnot. That's got to be put in there. And then along with the potential job description change for the director, saying that they're going to be managing more and related things.
And in that example, the actual individual grants that a department would manage is not a part of the job description. Grants come and go. So while they manage grants in their department, it doesn't specify which ones, so they may not necessarily need a job description change. I believe, for example, development changed that job description because it had been a long time since it had been updated, and it involved a number of updates. I don't know that the director of health's job description changed in the process, or at least I don't believe there were any proposed changes to it that I'm aware of.
Certainly, the director of workforce development's job description has been amended.
It was created. We did not previously have a director of workforce development. So as a part of that severance, that position, that job description was created. Also on this form, we do have Blair, can you go to the next page? It's not letting me do it. I think it's because of the Zoom. Thank you. We do have space on here for some goal setting that we use. This includes both personal development goals, such as perhaps I'd like to learn management. And I want some management training courses. I'm not currently a manager, but I'd like to become one. So in terms of regular employees that may have their interests set on management or growth, that's a good time to talk about their career goals with their manager. Short-term goals might be things that you can complete in the next year, and then long-term goals might be more strategic and may involve multi-year plans or some larger overarching changes and goals. In all cases, evaluations should be signed by the employee and the supervisor. This just ensures that the record indicates that this evaluation was delivered to the employee and that the employee has received a copy. So we do have signature lines on them. If these forms are changed, we do encourage you to keep those signatures, as it's good bookkeeping.
Please.
Alan here. Actually, anytime when we're doing this, are we also putting on compensation? And is there a point where we are saying this is a yearly review and we think the compensation, I'm thinking that, I don't mean to talk about anybody in particular, but when we added extra jobs to Mark Van Kerkhoff's job, we also increased his compensation. So we rewrote the job description, and my question, I guess, is did we also put on their salary? And then in a year, when we reevaluate our executive directors, is there an opportunity to discuss raises or some kind of extra compensation, a trip to Bermuda? Can we add that at that time, and should it go on a form like this?
So compensation is something that the board determines for each department head, and you as a board will need to decide how you would like to address that. From a general HR's perspective, evaluations should be considered among the whole of other information when determining salary. So you certainly should take that into consideration when you're determining salary, but whatever process you want to put into place for evaluating the salary of department heads still needs to be established by you, the board. This is simply about evaluating. In terms of what you described, for example, with Mr. Van Kerkhoff and the change in his job description, that was not a part of an evaluation process. That was a partner reorganization and a change in his job description. And if you are going to change somebody's job description significantly, then I think as a board, it is appropriate for you to evaluate the compensation at that time and make a decision. But this isn't something that's established as far as a process in code or resolution or policy or process right now, but that's something you as a board should definitely take into consideration how and when you want to evaluate the compensation of department heads.
So can I follow up? When we did Mr. Van Kerkhoff, did we notate that in some way in his file or in your records or something, that we had changed the job description and we had changed the salary?
Yes, I included something in his file with his new job description.
Okay.
And there's a payroll form that indicates his new salary, and that would go in his file to show that there was a change in his job description.
Okay. And others similarly?
Yes, if that were to happen with an employee at any level, that they had a job that was reorganized or changed, resulting in a regrading or a restructuring that resulted in a salary increase, that would need to be documented in their file.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
Is there any grade given 1 through 5, or I'm going back to my corporate background where employees would be graded, like 1 was promote now, 2 is exceeding expectations, 3 is expectations, 4 is trouble, and 5 is big
So
trouble.
my next slide is about the grading scale. So
Never mind.
we'll actually be covering that in detail, because that is an extremely important point, especially as you are looking at, submitting, contributing to evaluations of multiple people. You want to maintain as much consistency as you can as you do that. It's hard because it is a subjective assignment of a number, but the more you can all be on the same page about what those numbers mean, the more consistency your program has. This is a presentation that I've given to individual departments as they've started evaluation processes. It is consistent with what I've talked to other departments about, because I do believe that this is a best practice in grading, and scales. So the more consistency we have, the better.
I'd like to ask my question now, and this has to do with point 3, long-term goals. So a department head's goals are based on the goals set forth annually. I'm asking if this is what we're going to be doing. Goals set forth by the committee when you establish your goals. Because they can recommend goals because they're in it, they see it, they're living it day to day. And they see where their department needs to go. But the board the committee sets their goals. So my question is, these long-term goals, can the department head, as they do now, have the ability to talk to their chair of their committee and other individuals within the committee saying, this is where we need to go, and I'd like to develop that goal because I see it, I know we need it? Or are they under the restraint or the opportunity with the goals that are set forth by the board? I mean, how do both long-term goals match so that the board is not evaluating goals set forth by themselves that may not match the goals that are set forth by the board, by the department head? Does that?
We do have a more detailed conversation on SMART goals later that'll kind of include some more detail on this, but I think when it comes to goals, the committees set goals for themselves, and I think the department head would be a subset of that goal. So if the committee sets a goal, the department's function may be a subset of it as you go through the goal development process. So your goal as a committee might include goals that you're going to set for one or more department heads.
Okay.
To achieve the committee's goal. So your committee has certain powers and authorities, and one of them is helping steer the direction of the department. But goals cannot be created in a vacuum. You would have to include the department head in that conversation. As we will talk about when we get to SMART goals, there are a lot of details that you will need the department head's input. What's realistic? You don't necessarily know what's realistic for that department to complete without that conversation with the department head. So this goal setting will have to be part of a deeper conversation, both with your committee and with the department head.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. Thank you.
So first we'll get a little bit into, Blair, can you advance the slide? It's still not letting me do it. Thank you. So the rating scale, and this is where, I have a big 3 on there because 3 is your number. 3 does not mean an average employee. It does not mean everything is not exceptional. An employee that is a 3 has done literally everything you've asked them to do and done it well. This is a person that has met all your expectations. 3 is a good score. If someone is meeting all of your expectations, they are an excellent employee. And I promise you, if every employee was a 3, you wouldn't even need a human resources department. It's a wonderful score. I think a lot of people see a 3 and they think I'm average. And I think it's really important for everybody to know 3 does not mean average. 3 means successful. Scores above or below a 3 should include examples and comments. Employees do need to know what they did that did not meet your expectations or what they did that was exceptional. The only way for them to understand your expectations is to understand what they did that was above or below your expectations. Doing a good job is not a 4 or a 5. You did this job well. They were expected to do it well. They were paid to do it well. That's what they were hired to do. I'm just going to use myself as an example because it's a way to put color on this. I manage the health insurance fund. It's $25 million a year of county money. It involves working with brokers, considering the needs of employees for their health needs, considering the financial situation of the county, looking at market trends, It's a complicated task. If I do it well, you'll never hear about it. Doing it well is an expectation of my job. Just because it's hard doesn't make me a 4 for doing it well. It's a 3. Done it well, you didn't have to hear about it. It being difficult does not make it a high score, the task being difficult. A task being difficult may relate to how much a job pays, but it does not relate to your expectations. It being difficult, you still expect it to be done well. An example of something that might be extraordinary is something that's beyond what you expected. And again, I'm just for clarity, I'm just going to use myself as an example because I think it's a good way to illustrate it without calling anyone out. When we had problems with workforce development earlier in the year, spent a great deal of my time going over there and trying to help get them back on track. That is not a part of my job description. It's not something that I regularly do. It's just something that I did to try to help out that was above and beyond. So that might be something that affects a score because it wasn't something that I had to do. And if I did it well, you may think that I may have did something that was above the expectations. So when you look at expectations, you want to really ask yourself, what do I expect from this employee? And if they didn't do it, would I be okay with that? If they didn't do it and you'd be okay with that, like you'd still consider them a decent employee, then that's something that should raise their score up to a 4 or to a 5. If it is something that if they didn't do, you'd have a problem with it, then you shouldn't give them a higher score for it because you're sending them an incorrect message that that was something extraordinary and unexpected from them. Same thing with things that you mark people down for. If you're going to mark someone down, you need to let them know what your expectation is for that. So if you're going to mark someone down for something, you should also be able to communicate to them what steps they would need to take to meet your expectations. Are there any questions? Okay.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity when we're having this I assume there is, when we're having this discussion with our executive director, for the executive director to say, well, here are the things that I think I accomplished this year, and I'd like to share them with you. And I say that only because we don't all know everything that's going on, and it would be helpful. Like, I suspect that you are dealing with brokers all the time to try and get us the best prices. Now, you might think that's part of your job, but I'm thinking part of your job is you could just let it lie. But if you're going out and trying to find better prices and better services, and our employees are coming to you and saying, I really need this, we need to know that.
Absolutely. I encourage sending out a self-evaluation. So you send out to that employee the exact same form that you were going to use, and you ask them to rate themselves. And if they're going to mark, I did this great, you have to include a comment that says, what did you do that was great? This is your best tool for making sure that you and that employee are on the same page. If you think someone is just meeting expectations and they think they've done something exceptional, well, maybe they need to know that that exceptional thing was something you expected them to do. If they think that they're just meeting your expectations, but you think they're exceptional, it's good for them to know where their expectation lies, because they may have to adjust their priorities at some point. And understanding where that is, where they can make adjustments, can be helpful in making sure that they're achieving everything you need them to achieve. So I encourage a self-evaluation. And by using the same form, you can really look through and see where are we not on the same page.
That's great.
So which way does the numbering go?
And I will take you back up the page if I can. So the top, and that's small, but I can tell you what it says because I have it here. 5 is exceptional. And then after each one, and I'll send this form out to everybody, it gives specifically what each of them mean. So that kind of helps keep us with consistency. 5 would be consistently superior. So this is something not just the one-off, like my workforce development thing, that was a one-off. I'm not still involved with that department. Versus something exceptional that you took on that you're continuing to take on. Effective, highly effective, a 4 would be that there's been multiple instances in which you've exceeded expectations. Proficient would be that you've just done everything. We've talked about 3 in detail. And then 2 would be that they're meeting some of the criteria for that particular item that you're grading, but there are some things that they genuinely need to work on. And then one is the performance in that regard is completely unsatisfactory. It's something they're not doing at all, or they're completely missing the mark. Again, I would consider use of 1 and 5 very seldom, either in that, as Ms. Bates stated, that employee that's ready to be promoted, or that employee that we're having some significant problems with and they might need some kind of performance improvement plan.
What is, no, I can't read the word for number
Microphone, huh?
2. What's the
Highly
one-
effective.
What, number 2?
Oh, number 2 is inconsistent.
Inconsistent, not inconvenient. Okay.
Mhm.
Consistent, thank you.
Any other questions on the scoring? Claire, if you want to go forward a couple of pages to the one that's titled Gathering Information. We kind of touched on this a little bit already, so I'll kind of zoom through it. You can use your observations. I recommend a self-evaluation or conversation with that department head to gather information that you might not be aware of. Key performance indicators. That is any metric that you've pre-established to determine performance. It can be many different things. It can be budget performance. Where, currently, is there a process to evaluate with a department head if they go way over their budget? I don't know that there is, but that's definitely something you can consider, how they've performed on their budget. Any other metrics that might be in place. And again, I'll just use myself an example. How our health insurance fund has performed, or how our liability insurance has paid out. Are we having a reduction in claims with the risk manager, for example, could be something that you could use as a performance indicator, where you can get some very objective, concrete information to use in your evaluation process. That is something that when you do your first evaluation, you're probably going to want to set up. What metrics do we have? And that's a part of setting SMART goals that we'll talk about in a little bit. What metrics do we have that we can use to assess this person's success at the things that we've asked them to do? And the last one is that peer or partner feedback. And I included where appropriate, because I do want you to use that cautiously and make sure that as an evaluator, you're taking into consideration how biased or unbiased that feedback might be before you solicit it. And I do believe that it's important for, if you are going to solicit feedback from others, that the person you're evaluating knows where that feedback might come from.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
I have a question about energy and environmental.
Mhm.
Would we be doing Jody's performance, or Mark? Would that be you? Is Mark still here? Mark Van Kerkhoff.
So the board itself will have to determine which committee it would like to have do it or to hold the meeting. And I would encourage board members from both committees would need to participate in that, because they would both have important feedback to share. But that's a decision for the board and the committees to make.
And my thought is that in that arena, that Jody Wellnick is a director and a
Mhm.
director. We don't have a director who manages a director. The board manages the director.
Mhm.
So it would truly be the board's job.
Well, don't the directors report to the standing committees?
Well, the standing committee, the board, yes.
The board buy-in through the standing committee, right? So the standing committee may give some of that day-to-day information that they interact, and they are going to be the ones conducting the evaluation. But certainly the entire board should participate in that process, because I know I personally interact with all of you, not just the members of the Human Services Committee.
Okay.
But it is your job, Ms. Bates, to convene that.
Okay.
Yes, it is the responsibility of the standing committee to convene it, to make it happen, to set it in their meetings as needed, to make sure it happens. But certainly everybody should be providing feedback.
Good.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
As I'm listening and processing all this, I'm wondering, when we set our committee goals, was that the goal For the department or for the committee?
Those were the goals for the committee. Again, I'll use myself as an example. One of the goals of the Human Services Committee in 2025 related to internships, which is not something that I as a director have the authority over. Those are handled by the director of each department. So I don't have a lot of ability to sway that. They are funded within the departments, and it's the department head's responsibility to establish interns within their department under our current practices. So while the committee can look at providing resources to the department heads to make it happen, that would be the committee's responsibility because it's not within my purview to do it. So there may be instances in which the committee's goals do not align with the department head's goals. Further, if the committee wanted to give me an action item to write a policy pursuant to it, or to review grants for possible grant funding, or in some way assign me a subset goal, they certainly could. And then it would be my responsibility to complete my subset goal towards their greater goal.
Okay, thank you.
When writing feedback in evaluations and in any kind of time we're giving feedback, we want to make sure that it's constructive and useful. I think one of the biggest things to do is to be specific, give examples. If you're not specific, if you give someone some kind of what I would just say is a more vague feedback, like be more agreeable. That is not something that is easy for an employee to provide action on. You would need to be specific. In this instance, you behaved in this way, and I would prefer, my expectations are that you behave in this way. So to make sure that you provide them enough information for them to take action on your feedback. Feedback without examples or action steps isn't going to help drive their growth. Behavior-based suggestions have to include examples of the behavior you'd rather see. It's the only way for them to take action. You also want to make sure that your feedback includes changes that the employee is able to make. Telling an employee to cut their budget in half, for example, they can't do that. It's not necessarily within their authority or their power to do it. And when you do want them to do something that requires a resource that they don't have, make sure you give them the resources to do it at the time in which you expect that. So we just want to make sure that feedback is given in a way such that we are not backing anyone into a corner, and make sure that they know what they need to do. An employee receiving feedback to make changes should know what changes they need to make when they walk out of that meeting. So now we're going to talk about goals. So this is all about SMART goals. Most people have heard the term SMART goals, and I'm going to probably know what it is if you've been in business in any length of time in your life. This is certainly not my original work. This is a very well-established way to set goals to make sure that your goals actually drive change. So each of the letters stands for something. The S, they should be specific about what you want to accomplish. They should be measurable. So you need to have a way to determine if that goal is being met or not. You need some kind of way to measure success. They should be attainable. So you want to set yourself up for success by picking something that is actually attainable. And the R is for realistic. Be realistic about choosing your goal. It's got to be something that, given the actual circumstances, you can actually accomplish. And they should all include a timetable. When do you expect it done? A lot of people are unsure of the difference between attainable and realistic. So I'm going to try to use an example. So attainable versus realistic. Attainable refers to if the goal can be reached with the completion of the steps you've planned. So that means if I do all the things that I've planned to do in my specific section, will the goal that I've set actually be reached? An example is I want to learn to speak Spanish fluently. I have to study Spanish 1 hour per day for a year. Will I be fluent at the end of 1 hour a day per year? I'm going to go with probably not. I think if I spent 1 hour per day I would not be fluent in Spanish at the end of that. That is not an attainable goal in 1 year with the steps I have outlined. Realistic says, let's say the answer to that was yes, I'll be fluent if I spend 1 year a day on it. Now the question is it realistic? Is it realistic for me, a single mom with a full-time job and a couple of kids, to spend an hour every day studying Spanish? Is that realistic for me? So that's a separate question. So that first one goes to, will the goal I've set be attainable with the steps I've outlined? And the realistic goes to, is it realistic under the circumstances? Do I have all the resources I need to actually complete the steps I've laid out? So I kind of go into a little detail because I know that setting SMART goals is incredibly difficult. I don't want to imply that this is easy at all. Having your goals be SMART goals is really hard. I think one of the hardest ones to do is setting measurable goals and being specific about the steps. Those are the hardest. We all know when we want it to be done, and making sure our goals are attainable and realistic is just a check step for us. But writing these specific steps and the measurements is really the hardest part. So I just used, it's just a silly example. So, for example, I want to clean my garage so that my cars can be parked inside before winter. That's a goal I might set for myself. I have to be specific. What am I going to do? I'm going to take all the items that are in my garage right now in bins, label them, stack them, and get them in the corner so that I can fit the cars in. How am I going to measure that? I'm going to measure when I can fit my car in the garage, one or both, how I'm progressing on that goal. Attainable. Is there enough room? Even when the garage is clean and the bins are stacked, will I be able to fit them? Maybe my garage isn't big enough for 2 cars, even when it's clean. Then I would be setting a silly goal. Is it realistic? Yeah, I have plenty of bins for the stuff. I'm healthy enough to do the work. I have the time off of work, or whatever other steps I might need to say to make sure I'm going to be able to do this. And then my timetable. Well, I put before winter, so I'd say before the first snow. That would be a SMART goal. It includes the steps. I've done the check step on attainable and realistic, and I know how to measure it, and I know when I want it done. That's an easy one. That's a little thing. As you're looking at big goals for the county and for your department heads and for your employees, I know this isn't an easy task, but it is worth the time going through and trying to answer these questions to make sure that you are able to provide goals that are actionable and actually will achieve the things you want. And setting a goal that someone can't attain is very frustrating for that person and will actually only make their job more difficult and not helpful. And I just don't think that's what any supervisor is trying to do for their employee. Setting pie in the sky goals actually just holds people back. Have any questions on this?
Yes.
Alan here, can I assume that this is a give and take? That an employee is able to say, wow, that's not reasonable, or how about if we tweak this? Is it collegial?
It has to be done in conjunction with the person that would be working on the goal. While it's still the manager's responsibility to determine what direction we're going, the capacity of that employee, the challenges they may be facing, the employee has to be able to state what those things are. For example, whether a goal is realistic or not is going to be entirely based on the employee's capacity to complete it and the resources they have available. If they do not have the time or the resources to complete a goal, then they need to let you know that it's not realistic. It's not a SMART goal.
Can I follow up? An interesting example was this morning when someone said, well, if we had a second or a third shift person around, we might have been able to catch that leak
The water.
sooner. So that's something for us to be thinking about.
Well, it was very specific. The measurable would be, is there the staff and the ability to pay for this? Is the ability to pay for it? So attainable, do we have to hire new staff to do this, or can they shift around the staff? Realistic, is there enough staff to share Or are there other things would have to be compromised to go back to measurable? And what are the expected results? How soon can we get somebody on third or fourth shift to manage the building? I mean, I'm just making that off the top of my head, but refine that, and that's pretty much where you're going with that. But that is a specific goal that was just realized. So it's not part of your SMART goal measurement. Because your SMART goal, if these are annual reviews, this is in response to a problem that has just come forward, not to a sustained goal that you are establishing on your committee to have a, let's say, a jail that is without a violent incident,
Okay,
something, it's something similar to that.
follow up. This is just an example of something that could happen anytime. The conversation the board will want to have with its director in this case is having a second shift person and a third shift person, something that is important enough for us to make it affordable. Or to make it a priority.
That's for the committee to decide, but that is not the expectations to measure the job performance of the executive director for that. Because the committee is going to have to decide if it has the capacity. If you are using public dollars that are limited, can that public dollar be used to support that?
Okay.
If truly, when you are setting goals and doing evaluations, you need to set the goal and then you will evaluate on that goal the following year. So that gives me an opportunity to mention something that was a question I received through this process. When am I going to receive these goals that I'm going to be evaluated on? You would need to set goals. So for your first evaluation, and I think I have a later slide on this, for your first evaluation, you're going to talk about the attributes that are on your form, kind of give this person an idea of what your expectations are. The first one is really going to just be setting up this process. I think that that's the most you can do in the first evaluation that you ever given an existing employee is set your expectations and work out your process. At that time, for example, with the example that Ms. Allen gave, you may choose to create a SMART goal regarding establishing a second shift if your committee thinks that that's a direction they want that department to go. In order to do that, you'd need to set steps and include in that a conversation about if it's attainable and realistic. And if you're not going to provide funding for the change, is it attainable? Is it realistic? It may be attainable, right? It is attainable that if I tell you to hire 2 more people, it's attainable to have a second shift. Is it realistic? Probably not if you're not going to fund it, right? So you need to make sure that you're providing the resources under realistic. Do you have the ability? Do you have the resources to complete these steps? If you do not have the resources, it's not a SMART goal. And this is kind of, we've already covered a lot on here. Department goals need to be discussed with the employee, the manager and the employee have to work together. You have to work together because the elements of a SMART goal really require a collaborative conversation. And that discussion will build the components of those SMART goals. It's also helpful if you're giving multiple goals and limited resources to make sure that your employee understands the priority of those goals. If they can't all be completed, which goals are the most important to you? So that's a good time to establish some priority or at least discuss with that employee what that priority is. And this, oops, I lost a slide there. Among the things that you guys want to talk about is your process. And I just kind of want to review some thoughts about what we talked about with the process as far as the board you don't really have a process beyond what is set in the evaluations policy. But you would want to include a closed session agenda item prior to the evaluation. You may or may not include that department head in that some or all of that closed session as you see fit as a group. And you should do that prior to the evaluation so that you can set up some of the components that are talked about in the process. If you want to make adjustments to the evaluation form or the criteria, it should be done at that time prior to the evaluation. If you want to talk about existing goals or new goals, you might want to have a conversation that includes the department head regarding some of those goals. Who, if anyone, do you want to solicit feedback from outside of the board? That needs to be discussed ahead of time. How comments from board members will be made and recorded, and who will handle putting the comments and feedback from the board onto the form so that a board member should be taking care of that process as well. And then in the following month, or once it's completed, you would need another closed session agenda item to discuss and score the evaluation. So then you would need to look at the whole of the feedback from all the places you've gotten it. And you would need to discuss as a committee assigning those numeric scores. You also will need to determine who will represent the committee in delivering that evaluation to that department head.
I thought that the resolution suggested that the entire committee deliver the evaluation, but I'm not a little
No,
fuzzy on that.
It indicates a designee, and part of the reason that it was done that way was it's an extremely intimidating environment to sit with 24 people telling you your performance. Once the elements have been established, I think you will get a much more conversational and you can deliver these comments in a less formal way, one-on-one. So once you've authorized this is what the evaluation is, that gives a better opportunity for the committee to designate which board member they would like to sit and share the results of that. And then that board member could come back to a future committee. If there were feedback from the department head, they could come back and share that with the committee as well if they wanted. If you are to include multiple people, you are going to have an Open Meetings Act issue. So I don't recommend you have multiple people, but a single person who is just going to deliver the predetermined evaluation and share it with the department head, receive their feedback, and potentially share that feedback with others as needed.
Or, I remember I asked if it could have two people from a committee to go. And there was some discussion about that. And I still think, my opinion, that having two people from a committee do that evaluation serves both the committee well as the individual, the department head whose evaluation is being delivered, for clarity and for good listening.
Maybe Mr. Frank can chime in as he did at the time. Having multiple people went into a gray area with the Open Meetings Act.
Just two.
Having two people went into a gray area with the Open Meetings Act, and then we felt it was safer to stick with one. So that was on their advice. Again, the person is authorized only to deliver the feedback that is in the written evaluation.
But
so that certainly that's a choice for the board. But at the time, the recommendation was that it be a single person.
John, what do you think? Just two.
Yeah, so two's fine because you're not having them come back and advise the committee. The issue is it's come up in the past is when we've had the avoidance of three, and then those two people come back and become essentially an advisory body of the committee. That by itself, regardless of whether there's one or two, is in fact considered a committee. So if all we're discussing is that they are conveying the information as the board would seek, you can have one, you can have two, but if you go to three, then yeah, you need a meeting.
To three is a problem.
And one of the things we discussed was the desire for them to come back and share the results of that meeting with the committee, which was part of the reason you couldn't have two, and it became advisory. at the point in which they share what happened in that meeting with the rest of the board or with the committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Alan here, I just want to weigh into, it's just human nature that we all have bias, or that we all see things a certain way. And the fact is that some people are visual and some people are audio and some people want to be able to read. And I just think that two people covers more bases, maybe enough bases. If we're dealing with something that's so personal and so pertinent, even though we have a script from our committee and so on, I just think the give and take between two people is safer.
So
So you're saying one person should deliver the feedback to one person?
No, I think two people should talk with the employee
Okay,
and be prepared to,
that's what I thought you were saying,
okay, good.
Except
Sorry,
that-
I don't, see, right there
right
is a
there.
reason why you need two people.
Okay.
I think generically speaking, it would make sense to have your chair and your vice chair of whatever the committee is.
Great.
Here's the only thing I'm gonna also say, and this is just me having been here for, 2.5 years, watching the executive directors and how they interact with all of you. I don't think there's a single executive director that would be intimidated by sitting in a closed session meeting with their own particular committee. And frankly, if they were, that would be a separate, to me, I would say unsatisfactory skill on their part. They are the head of a department where they oversee substantial number of people. They deal with all of you all the time. I would expect that they would have no problem having a comfortable meeting in closed session with all of you. But I'm not the board. I'm not going to tell you how you handle it. If you want to do it with two people, even with two people, I would have a real concern of a Pollyannish presentation of there possibly being real issues. Because the thing I've noticed is board members, and frankly, on the flip side, depending on who it is, it could be maybe geared a little bit more sternly than what the committee intended. So it's really up to you guys on how you want to do it. There's a telephone game both directions on this. And
John, I'm very delightful when we meet, so.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Cliff just said that he's very delightful.
so it's purely up to you, all of you, on how you want to handle it. What I don't want you guys to do is walk away from this idea that they can't hear this from the committee as a whole. They absolutely can in closed session. It's just you all's preference.
I think it's important for the board, before you start your evaluations to that point, to make it consistent throughout all evaluations, so that one committee may decide, I want to use myself and a partner of chair, vice chair, to go talk to my executive director. Another committee may decide, I want the entire committee to be present. It may be appropriate to make sure that the board is consistent with their approach. All is good, but if you want to evaluate by committee, awesome. If you want to send a small team out to do that evaluation, to present the evaluation and have a more intimate conversation, that's fine too. But I would hate to think that one committee has the whole group and another committee has just two or one.
The board could certainly pass this in the policy or a resolution so that you're compelling it all to be the same if you want it to be. I would state, if you're going to do more than one person, I would encourage you to do the whole committee. Simply so that you're not in that gray area where people feel like they have feedback that they now can't share, because then there would be an issue. And just, I think it's just safer, makes more sense to either do the committee or an individual, whichever way you choose to do it. If you do the whole committee, I think it's very important that you have a really strong consensus before you go into that meeting, because you do not want to be sharing mixed messages.
I agree. Oh, yes.
Um,
Ms. Bates.
Going back many years in my experience, the thought of one director and a whole committee sounds terrible to me. So I think our feedback was always one-on-one. It wasn't because it would feel intimidating, I think, to possibly for one director to face 7 committee members.
And I can, you know, in terms of normal practices, I would state that the majority of evaluations are done one-on-one because the whole evaluation is in writing. And you are just sharing what's in writing. So while I'm a huge fan of approver and I believe in any kind of adversarial meetings with employees or any kind of changes that are ever presented to employees, you need a third person there to be that. This is what happened in the meeting person, especially if you're asking questions and things like that. That evaluations are supposed to be only delivering what is documented in the evaluation. It's not supposed to be anything else.
I think too,
On the flip side of that, I would say as an executive director with this county, I would have no problem sitting in a committee meeting and receiving that. But I completely understand why someone would, especially in some of your newer directors, maybe that aren't as familiar with the board and everyone on it, that could be intimidating, which is why it was written not to do that, because the person that is intimidated by it is not going to want to tell you that.
I have two things. Mr. Surges has got a question and then Mr. Linder, but I'm hoping that we can wrap this up by 2:30 because we have another meeting at 3. If that would be all right, an hour and a half meeting. Mr. Surges, you had a question?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to agree with Mavis on this. Most of the, with the limited involvement I've had with employees here and hiring, the overarch that I see across the board is the notion that we don't know who our boss is, even during the interview process. I don't want to answer to multiple people. I get too many mixed signals. I don't understand who I'm answering to. So when we look at an evaluation process, I couldn't agree with Mavis more. I don't understand why this wouldn't be the committee chair and vice chair that reports right back to their committee. It is intimidating in my experience to do more than 2 people. On the other hand, we really have great relationships with our staff and our team. And just by virtue of the way the organization and the body works, that employee that, you know, in this case of the department head, really has to understand the flexibility that they're in a public sector management by committee. But I think that as we move forward with this is going to shuffle itself out. The cream is going to rise to the top. And, you know, 6 months from now, we're going to say, golly, 2 people was just not the way to go, or doing it by a committee. Oh, you know what? Maybe that wasn't the smartest move. And we'll tweak it and we'll make it happen. But, you know, in this case with Mavis, I would say, let's give it a whirl, you know, for a period of time and just see where this goes. And if this works as wonderfully as we think, you know, move it forward. You know, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Linder?
I tend to love all my fellow board members, respect them very much. I don't think we have the capacity to put 7 people in the room and deliver one message. There's just so much of it. Yeah, but, or you forgot, or whatever. I'm with Mavis one-on-one. I think the whole team should maybe discuss with Mavis what it is she's going to do, how she's going to present this information. But then I really believe one person presents, because we just can't, you know, somebody comes in from left field all the time on something. I'm surprised I haven't been interrupted already. So, you know, I really go for the one.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Okay, and I am in the opposite of my fellow board members who I respect immensely and love working with. There. When we first thought about this, I think one of the things we were thinking about was by having the whole committee do it, the committee would get a chance to have closer one-on-one interaction. And I won't pick on Jamie, but let's say Mark Van Kerkhoff. Okay. I talk to Mark quite a lot because we're on several different committees together, but maybe everybody else on jobs doesn't have a chance to talk to Mark. And maybe they don't get a chance to hear directly from Mark about what his priorities are and what is important to him and all the other things that he's doing. So by only him and I talking, the rest of our committee is not really getting to know Mark. And likewise, Mark's not really getting to know the rest of the committee. He's only knowing what me as Anita Lewis committee chair thinks, you know? So I kind of like that. I don't think any of these conversations are going to be adversarial, because I really think that we are intending them to be a way to strengthen our relationships with these directors, and, you know, so that we all have understanding of how we can keep making this county better. Because they've got great ideas that they can't always share in a meeting. We've got things that we can't always share. So I just think this time to have that one-on-one with them as a committee is just going to be so valuable. 7-on-1. Okay, the 7-on-1. And they're all used to presenting and being around crowds. These are our high-level directors. This isn't a, you know, first-year employee, you know, so, and used to answering things to us. In even a more adversarial way. A lot of times when they have to answer to a budget item or why this is an emergency requisition or those kind of things. So I don't think they'd be intimidated by us at all.
So right now, as was said, that the resolution says the full committee and board members, the full board, 24 members. So whether as we talk about specific committee, it actually encourages the full board. So 24 potential members and 25 with me to attend the evaluation process. So that is what I believe is written in that. So it's not just a committee, it's everybody. And yes, I do understand and I appreciate the fact that this will allow the full board to get a better idea of what our directors are doing, whether they come and join online and listen, or they participate in the actual meeting. But once again, if you are not in the committee who have gone through the evaluation and you're encouraging input from the full board for make direction, that can be, to your point, Mr. Linder, potentially, I'm not saying it will, but potentially a little wonky. I don't think that's a professional word, but
How do you spell that? No.
We also have to be aware as we set this up, how much additional meeting in closed session time we're setting up for ourselves.
so I do hope that all of you as a full board, not here, but at perhaps at the next executive committee, we can take a look at that resolution, and then discussion then can flow forward to the full board for either amendment, approval, and just so you're all on the same footing as you move forward. You're all on this exact same page on your procedure. Okay, 8 minutes. All right.
Was
and-
wonky with a W?
I believe it is.
Capital
Wonky.
W?
It's a good word, isn't it?
Well, and if we have time left, that's good because we're actually done.
Oh,
So that was the end of my presentation unless we have additional
We have
questions.
2 questions, Mr. Roth.
Roth here. Our 24 members, we all have different strengths and opportunities. Some will be better at doing reviews. Some people are better at finance. And I think every committee is going to be slightly different. And as long as they can get it to work correctly or properly, and some committees will have to adjust over time, what works, what doesn't, and tweak it.
Sure.
So I don't think we should pre-decide. And people that are more comfortable doing that will probably rise to the service to do it. And people that are uncomfortable doing reviews, it's depending how you grew up in your employment. You know, I was with a company that was very bureaucratic, and if you didn't write a 20-page review process, you would get yelled at. Oh, you're not following the process, because it was all paper oriented. And we have to be flexible and be willing to adjust as we go. And we got to give it a shot. You know, we could spend months trying to determine what's the best way. And that's a waste of time.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Last question.
Okay. I've lived long enough that I've seen this instance. I don't think anybody else here has. How do you want to handle a situation where you have two executive directors going up against each other over some issue?
Bring in a third.
I'm sorry?
Bring in a third.
But that wouldn't be part of their evaluation process.
Yeah, I think
not
that's
an
outside the
evaluation
scope.
process.
Yeah.
Because that's happens, you're
Well-
evaluating each one separately. They may be speaking about X, right?
Yeah.
But X has got nothing to do with their personnel evaluation. That has got to be, X has got to be about work or money or procedure or overstepping toes.
Ma'am,
Yes.
I think we would have to determine who the lead. You're saying two executive directors are in conflict?
Yes.
Or two committees are in conflict over the evaluation of
Directors,
one?
executive.
Actually, I'm not doing an evaluation at this point. I am describing a situation where you had two executive directors and each had its own point of view. And
Uh-huh.
the unsatisfactory way that unfolded was that one went to the state's attorney and got the state's attorney's backing. And the other one was kind of left out in the cold. So how does that get resolved? Committee chairs kind of came in and kind of helped.
Okay, so you're answering your own question?
It was not a satisfactory process in any way.
But it's really not part of today's discussion.
If you're-
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Really part of today's
And that-
discussion.
It's not. Okay, I'm going to withdraw it and just say, people, will you think about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're referring to how to evaluate someone on an interpersonal issue like that, there are attributes on the evaluation form such as conflict resolution where you could bring something like that up.
But I have one more question. I said no more questions and I have a question. The 360 evaluation that we were speaking about before, a number of our department heads actually work with other elected officials. Should they be part of the reporting evaluation process or not?
That's an individual conversation for your committee to take on to who they'd like to solicit. I can tell you the pros and cons of soliciting feedback outside this board. You're going to get a different perspective and find out some information maybe you didn't know regarding things like conflict resolution. So there's potentially valuable information into reaching out to other elected officials for information. What you don't want to do is create an opportunity for someone to put leverage on someone else because they have influence into your evaluation. So if you have an elected official that says, I want you to do this, department head, and if you don't, I'm going to tell the board you're difficult to work with. So you don't want to create a situation where you have other people providing leverage on your department heads because you're soliciting feedback from them. So I would just caution you into being careful who you solicit feedback from outside of this board, because there is a possibility for there to be leverage because of it. So you can ask the questions, but I would definitely, you want to take those responses in the whole of what they are and consider potential bias.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, it's time.
Chairman, although we can't vote.
Can't vote anything. I wish everybody a great presentation, Jamie. Well done. And you'll be handing out, perhaps you could send this to all the board members.
Certainly.
And then the form as well, so that you have a copy of it in your files. And
I can also include a calendar of the anniversary dates of your department heads, since the board chose to use anniversary dates to determine evaluation timing.
excellent, excellent. Well done. Very good. Thank you. Very nice presentation.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do that.
There's no motion needed,
We
and
just
this
get up
meeting
and
is
go.
adjourned. The defining ending
Microphone,
time is
please.
12:27 on
2/2012.
2/27 on the 14th of January, PM.